Welcome back, everyone. We will now commence with our Thematic Forum 1. But before I do that, there's a short announcement. There's a receiver on your table. And if you need the interpretation service, it's channel number 2 for English and channel number 3 for Persian. It's 2 for English and 3 for Persian. So if you need it, just plug in the earphones and then you can use it. Okay, now the topic for Thematic Forum 1 is Women in Need and Need for Women. It will emphasize women's role in attaining sustainable peace. And also, our speakers are those who made a change with their own stories. So now let me introduce our moderator, Young-Mi Cho. Please greet her with a big round of applause.
Hello everyone, it is my pleasure to meet all of you. Still, it is snowy outside, so I believe some of you will join later. So why don't we say hello to each other? It is our pleasure to be here with all of you. Please say hello to your neighbors.
창군 그리고
싫으면 이놈이 싫어. No. I hear Korean. I don't hear English. See, same thing. Korean.
통역을 하기 위해서는 통역이 되고 있나요? 자, 통역을 위해서는 영어는 2번 채널. 예.
English channel is number 2. English channel is number 2.
It worked now. Okay. 네, 지금 이제
I think it is working. So should I begin from the beginning? Is it working now? So now the moderator said that Percy is channel number 3. Is it working now? Thank you very much. This is a real-time interpretation. So let us begin from the beginning. Gangwon Province, Pyeongchang County, and World Summit Secretariat is jointly hosting this event. And 2018, Pyeongchang Legacy Foundation and 강원일보 is sponsoring this event. So we are hosting the 18th World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates, and The theme is Together, Stronger Together. And this is day 2 afternoon session. So afternoon session is always difficult because we are very tired. But I believe you will be very excited because we have prominent speakers and you will be moved by the story of these speakers. So I believe you can focus on this session. So the theme in this session is Women in Need and Need for Women. And I will serve as a moderator for this session. My name is Cho Young-mi from Korean Women's Movement for Peace. It is my great pleasure to meet all of you. For peace, many people made effort, and thanks to their dedication and effort, now we gathered here today. And in this journey of peace, the role of women is all the more important. All around the world, women have been dedicating their lives for human rights and democracy, and for their family, local community, nation, and the world. They have shown a new leadership. Moreover, they are working as a strong leader, and they are also emerged as a strong supporter. In particular, in politics, economy, and society, women can exert their leadership, and they are moving towards step by step to just and peaceful world. And today we gathered here with all these leaders. Social unity and community is destructing, and bipolarization and inequality is accelerating. In this time, many people are creating a new history or her story. So they will tell us how they broke the stereotype and fight against inequality and made the local region and country and world a better place. So the significance of this session is very important, and I'm very honored to be with you in this thematic session. Today we invited distinguished speakers, and what we would like to talk is for the sustainable peace, what we need to do and how we can make difference with women's leadership. And in the future, regardless of the ethnicity, race, age, gender, disability, religion, generation, and economy, how we can overcome all these difficult differences. So let me introduce all panelists, and please welcome them with a big round of applause.
And as you are all aware of, we have Lima Bowie. She is a Liberian peacemaker. Please give her a big round of applause. And second panelist, actually you met her. Of course, Lima Bowie was met with you. Shirin Ebadi, Dr. Shirin Ebadi was the first Iranian female judge, and also she was the first Islamic female Nobel Prize winner with a variety of stories, which will give you a insight. So please give her a big round of applause. This is Dr. Shirin Ebadi. Please give her a big round of applause. And third panelist is from Colombia. For females empowerment and leadership is what she has pursued, and going beyond the borders, she's demonstrating outstanding leadership. She's from Colombia, Nadia Sanchez. Last but not least, we are joined by a special guest, and I pay respect to her individually. She is the bear witness of Korean female movement history. And she is a civil activist and historian, educator, and she was the former minister of the gender equality and the family. Please give her a big round of applause. We are supposed to...
온라인으로 생중.
Now we are hosting this event offline and online. And in this thematic session, not just the speakers, but also the participants are the main players. So I hope you can actively participate in this session. And while listening to the stories of the panelists, you can write out your memo, and during the Q&A session, you can share your comments and questions. And in most cases, we ask a question to the speakers from the participant, but we also would like to give opportunity to the panelists to ask question each other so that we can learn from each other through empowering, sharing, and learning. So this is very comprehensive session. Then I will give 7 minutes to each panelist, and we will listen to the story of the panelist, and we'll learn about the future role of women. So let us turn to each panelist. Then the first speaker will be Lima Bowie. You have 7 minutes. Floor is yours. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
Thank you so much, and I'm very honored to be on this panel. The theme, Women in Need and the Need for Women. If we look at where we find ourselves globally, we tend to see that in our world today, there are numerous conflicts happening everywhere, from Syria to Yemen to South Sudan to DR Congo, which is prolonged, Central African Republic, Iraq, Afghanistan. Many places have North and South Korea, which is like a still kind of conflict. But if you look at all of the issues that we are faced with globally, you see that the challenge of women bearing the brunt of these conflicts and climate crisis and all of the different crises in our world is immense. In the late 90s, when women were, when there were many wars in Africa, people always say women bear the brunt of conflict, bear the brunt of conflict. And this was before the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. Everyone was talking about women bearing the brunt of conflict. But in those periods, even from the Bosnia-Herzegovina war, women were still in the forefront, in the midst of all of the problems they were having. They continued to be the ones who would initiate peace processes first in many communities. So while they are in need, they never really allow their need to stop them from trying to bring their communities to a full stop. Our story in Liberia is the same as many. In the middle of one of the worst civil wars in Africa, the women got up and decided that they wanted to do something to end the war. But that story of Liberian women did not start from my generation. It started from 1990 when I was just 17, and my mother's generation were the ones who started by providing meals for people who were internally displaced, trying to bring health care for people. Whilst we have all of this happening, and most times when we begin to track what happens to women in need, we tend to just stop to or begin from where crisis and conflict starts. But I want to use this moment, the rest of my time, to talk about before wars happen. Because there are many communities where people tend to wonder, why do we have so much femicide? Why do we have so much violence against women? In the late 2000 or early 2000, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, who is the former president of Liberia, Elizabeth Rand, were commissioned by then UNIFEM, which is now UN Women, to do a study on women, war, and peace. And they were supposed to come out with findings on what happens to women before war, during war, and after war. One of the conclusions of their study is that the impact of conflict on women's lives is the reflection of the interaction during peacetime. So people tend to wonder, so why do we have such atrocities during wartime? Go back into your community history and think about what is happening in peacetime. If you have high numbers of sexual violence, high numbers of gender-based violence, high numbers of femicide, even in the absence of war, you know that at the end of the day, when there is war or any kind of conflict, women will definitely be impacted in a very high rate. So even before wars, women are in need. The need for protection is there, the need for participation is there, and the need for prevention is there. During wars, you still have the need. So then you have all of these periods of transition, periods where you have people needing to redo societies. How do we redo societies? But how do we really stop in our track? And I think before wars, there is a need in any community. Yesterday I did the youth event, and one young lady talked about how angry she gets with the number of murders that she sees in her community. That is even in the absence of war. The question then becomes, if women are in need now, and they are seeing the need, and the need for them to be in processes are there, what do we do? I think there are many ways we can do that. Those of us who have huge platforms to continue to amplify that the need for women to be at all levels of decision making, at all levels of participation. That's the first thing. The second thing that many people tend to overlook is the need for funding. People tend to minimize the impact or the work that women do. Oh, local peace activists. But every local peace building work is the one that drives international peace building. Every local political activism is the one that drives change in every country. Today we see what women are doing in Iran. The world is now paying attention. It came from one unfortunate event and a group of women standing up and saying this is not going to happen on our watch. So there's a need for women, the need for women to be supported. The final need that I think we need to amplify is, before everyone was saying nothing for us without us. The time is ripe now. There are so many conversations about gender justice, peace, violence against women, all of the different things. And there are millions of dollars going into these things. Unfortunately, a lot of the decisions and the efforts do not take into consideration the grassroots women, women at the community level, women at the local level. It's time for us to step back and say, let's do this differently. They say the meaning of insanity is doing one thing over and over and expecting a different result. For decades, we've done this thing one way. Men in suits stalking for women, women who feel no impact to the situation, standing up for women. It's time for all of us to change the dynamics and allow those who have been impacted by these things, they have need, but the need for them to be involved cannot be understated. Thank you.
네,
Thank you very much. Actually, she is involved in Liberian peacemaking movement with the participation of women. She puts a lot of importance on this at a regional level. Grassroots female should be considered not as a victim but as an active player. So this is where our effort should be put in. Thank you very much. And the second panelist would be Dr. Shireen Ebadi. Please welcome her with a big round of applause.
I'm very glad to be present in this panel and talk about the most important thing in our societies, which is the rights of women. When you look at all of the countries in the world, you will see that in all of the countries, women are discriminated against. But the degree is different. In some countries, there is more discrimination against women. In some other countries, there's less discrimination against women. However, there is still no country in the world where you can see equal rights, even in your country. When you look at the laws, maybe you can see that you have good laws, but when we go to the society, we'll see that equal rights do not exist. In many other countries, the situation is worse. What is the reason for that? Why is it that women are discriminated against all over the world? I think that there is one reason for it, and we should know it. And that is the patriarchal culture. When I speak about the patriarchal culture, I don't mean the male gender. I mean the culture that does not accept the equality of human beings. In some countries, this culture exists, like the Islamic countries, and mostly in Eastern countries. It exists with more power. It's more powerful. But in some other countries, it's not as colorful, and there's less power to it. So patriarchal culture will use everything in order to justify itself. It even uses religion. Therefore, we can see in countries where religion is very powerful and it's their basis, they have male interpretations of religion. We do have three Abrahamian religions: Jewishness, Christianity, and Islam. When you look at the three of them, you will see that their laws are against women. They're discriminatory because all of these religious and sacred books have been interpreted by men. And it's not only Islam. For example, when we look at Europe, that's Christian, we haven't had a woman pope. So when we ask why is it that there has never been a female pope or archbishops? All the archbishops are male as well. The reason for it is that men have interpreted the Bible. The same thing is about Islam. The interpretation that they give out from Islam is that women are victims who have to obey their husband. The only duty that women have is to become mothers and bring children and train children. And it's interesting to know that in Islam, it's the religion of the father that's transferred to the child. Meaning, if the father is Muslim, the kid will be Muslim. Or in Islamic countries, the children take the name of the father because it's the father who transfers both his religion and his name to children. Now just imagine that in 1979, there was an Islamic revolution in Iran. And so it's predictable that during the first weeks of the revolution, discriminatory laws against women were passed. And it continues until now. The first issue was that all women who leave home or work in public places have to have hijabs. We were always Muslims, but we were secular. The hijab was not mandatory, but right after the revolution, it became mandatory. Women were against it, but unfortunately, men did not protect us. So then laws were changed, and men can now marry 4 wives pursuant to the laws, and they can divorce their wives whenever they want. Women didn't like that, and they protested, but the men were the ones who interpreted Islam. So every time we had protests in different times and regarding different subjects, but nothing happened. But then we decided that oppression is contagious. It's like a virus. If I am oppressed and others are silent, you will see that others will be oppressed as well. So after a while, men understood that this government was not only bad for women, it was contagious, and men's rights were also limited. Therefore, men decided to join us, and we became more powerful. When we became more powerful is when men found out that they should support us. This is why I believe that the title of this seminar, which says, "We're stronger together." So what I want to say is that a government that discriminates against women is not only bad for women and good for men. No, the rights of men will be limited too. So now we can see that a revolution is happening in Iran. The women started it. Women were the ones who went on the street, but they're not alone. And now men have joined them. So women and men are together. Of course, we are being suppressed badly. The government is very brutal. And approximately 20,000 people have been arrested. And every day one is executed in order to create fear in people. Over 480 people have been killed. 61 of them have been people under the age of 18. These are high school kids who are on the street because they know that their future is in being stronger together. So I know that we will be victorious. And as I said this morning, we will have this summit in my country, Iran.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, Shirin Ebadi is the first judge in Iran. However, due to the government, she was unjustifiably fired, and she taught law in university and participated in the establishment of the law of the family. And she is working with many grassroots organizations to change the oppressed society. And she worked with the victim families for a long time. In that sense, we need to understand what is the meaning of a society with gender equality. I believe it is equal, not just for women, but also for men. And when we look at this situation with the lens of gender equality, then we will understand what we need to do. So I believe she gave us this lesson. Thank you very much. Then let me move on to the third presenter. Nadia Sanchez will tell us her story. You have 7 minutes. Please give her a big round of applause.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here because it's an honor for me to share this scenario. I'm from Colombia. I'm not Korean, but I'm a citizen of the world. So this is the best example if you build in peace, because we are together the world, citizens of the world. I born in Colombia, and I have lived the conflict directly. So 6 years ago, I founded NGO She Is Foundation, and we create this foundation. We give more opportunities to girls and women victims of armed conflict, extreme vulnerability, women of the rural areas. And we create the first time with NASA, the first time in Latin America and Colombia, education program we give more opportunities to girls in Colombia and 5 countries more. This program was created because through education we build in peace. So we need more opportunities for women and girls. But when we create this program, we're thinking what is the best way to build in peace. And if we're talking about building peace, we need to talking about gender equity. We need talking about education for girls. If we need to talking about the building peace, we need to talking about how give more empowerment our girls. Because in Colombia, girls and women are victims of the war. And in my country, 4 years ago, signed the peace agreement. And it's the first time only 6 women in this peace processes. So now we try to sign another peace process with another group in Colombia. So 60 years in armed conflict learn me what do you doing about the building peace? And the first option is give more opportunities, girls and women, yes, but we need to amplify the voices, the all-level decisions. How do you say? We need to amplify these voices for the women don't have a voice. The last year, many women in my country protest and create and another groups try to amplify these voices. So as a woman, I would like to say, the voice of those who don't have a voice is the real peace in the world. We have more opportunities. For example, today, we have opportunity to talking with you. We have opportunity to travel to Korea. But many women and girls around the world don't have any opportunity. In my country and Latin America, it's no different in Asia or Africa, because many girls don't have internet. Many girls don't have a computer or access to education. So with She Is Foundation, I believe, and we believe, that the real fighter with the building peace is believe in another girls. And after, when you empower girl, you empower community. If you empower girls, you empower the country. But if you give more opportunities for these girls, you give more opportunities for all country to give more peace around the world. Our role is articulate with all sectors. I think that women in needed in building peace is because we need to integrate all sectors. No more working separate. Because we need, for example, in this panel, I know it's a public sector, NGO, academy. So we need to integrate all sectors and create leading and acting, because it's so beautiful we're talking about how building peace. It's amazing talking about how building peace. But the most necessary is how is acting now. How do you say here? Stronger together. So how we working together? So the most important is create the programs, access to education. The last year I was talking with Rigoberta Menchú. She's a Nobel Peace too, and she told me is the first step to create and building peace in the world is give education for our girls. Education, and after, believe that this education transform our life. Today, our girls and women in Colombia with She Is Foundation can say we are not only girls and women, we are change makers. We are building peace. I'm a woman and so honored here. I think so is a young woman, but the most important, my voice, is not only Colombian voice, it's not only young people voice. It's a voice to create and acting more programs through education. With NASA, with everything, because we need to integrate all sectors. Amplify the voices, because when I told no more women, many women around the world don't have a voices. Amplify, acting, and believe we can build in peace. Thank you.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. We have a very big round of applause now. So you emphasized the voice of the voiceless and how we can put this on the front of our society. And while listening to your story, I believe peace is common. So the powerful people should not dominate the peace. Rather, the peace should be distributed equally to everyone. And once we achieve this, we can create peaceful society. That crossed my mind while listening to your story. Last but not least, I would like to turn to the Korean speaker. Jung Hyun Baek, please go ahead. Distinguished guest. Yesterday, from the first session, we talked about democracy. We talked about democracy and peace. And today, I would like to tell you what is democracy and what kind of democracy we need. And Korean women made the democracy in Korea successful. So let me tell you how. And I also would like to share why there are many shortcomings in democracy in Korea. For 36 years, Korea was colonized by Japan and we were liberalized. And then we were divided into the two countries and we lived under the military dictatorship. And under that society, there were lots of domestic violence and sexual violence. So there were so many violences against women. And in 1987, democratization was successful and feminism became active. And democratic government created lots of laws and regulation to protect women. And Nobel Laureate President Kim Dae-jung created the Ministry of Women and Family, Gender Equality and Family. And now 97% of high school graduates are advancing to university, but still many women in Korea are not happy. Let me tell you why. We have the exchange with North Korea, and many women are very active in that efforts. And in the anti-Iraq war movement, women also participated in the activities, and KWLU was very active in women's activism. And in recent days, Women Cross DMZ and Korea Peace Network is at the core of the women activism. And I believe unification is very difficult for us because of the powerful countries neighboring us. And unification depends on those countries. And what we worry really great is after the Ukraine war, Korea is more closer to Japan, and there was a security agreement, and now the Korean government is trying to introduce more weapons from Japan, and Russia, Ukraine, and North Korea is getting closer and closer. So we are concerned. I actually received a booklet distributed in this event, and it talked about the six-party talks happened in Gwangju, and we have these six-party talks because Korea alone cannot achieve security. So by collaborating with the five other countries, we would like to protect ourselves by creating the Korean Peninsula peace regime. And many Nobel laureates support this. So we are making effort to achieve peace on the Korean Peninsula. And in this process, I look forward to listen to your voices from many other countries. And women are very active in these efforts, and we definitely need your support. Then let me tell you about democracy in Korea. Recently, we are selling a T-shirt in the Association of Women, and on the T-shirt it says that gender equality can complete the democracy. We had many advances. However, when it comes to the labor rights and economic participation, women are very vulnerable, and it is even worse after COVID-19 pandemic. Nowadays, many women are participating in labor force, but many of them are part-timers, and women receive only around 70% of the wage of a man, and that is the gap is the widest among the OECD member countries. That is a reality of Korea. And in particular, when it comes to child rearing and caring, many women are suffering greatly from the discontinuation of jobs. So a third of women leave their job due to child rearing, and gender conflicts and women hates are getting severe, and politicians are instigating this. And 70% of the voters, especially male voters, are supporting the conservatives. With the development of the internet, cyber sexual violence is very severe, and women cannot stay in their job, and they are threatened. And peace for women is broken, and youth unemployment is also very severe. According to the government statistics, employment rate is 90%, but actual unemployment rate is 11% because some people just work as a part-timer. So we are in a desperate situation, and in particular, the youth unemployment among women is even more worse. We are talking about the importance of democracy, and we need to tell what kind of democracy we will pursue. Galtung said that instead of pursuing a negative democracy, we need to pursue a positive democracy. And we also need to consider poverty as a structural violence. I can see that many women are suffering. When I was a minister, I met many poor women, and when I go back to my office, I had many tears. So I believe gender equality can complete democracy. Many people say that Korea is very advanced country in democracy. However, when it comes to the democracy in our daily lives, how we can ensure gender equality, we have a long way to go. And in this process, I believe you need to support and participate in real and genuine democracy in Korea. Thank you very much. So you talked about the overall situation in politics, economy, and society, and you also told us how much women are suffering in Korea. As for the human security, collective security, and group security, you talked about all these matters. And one thing to change, the organization she mentioned is Korea Peace Now instead of Korea Peace. And now we would like to open up the floor to accommodate some questions. And Shirin Ebadi and Chung Yeon-baek have a commonality.
쪽법
Because they are at the forefront of revision movement for family law, and in Korea they are actively participating in the movement to scrapping the system on the head of system in Korea. So actually they put much emphasis on the fact that everyone should clear the outdated legacy of gender inequality, and they should be treated equally as a human being, and the importance of this. And what brought you to this movement? What would be your motivation? So please, the floor is yours. So for us, actually in 2005 we abolished the system on the head of system, and it takes 6 years to revise the Family Act in Korea. So revision of the Family Act requires a lot of efforts and under the democratic government. However, now what we feel as a dilemma is that the laws changes and the institutions changes, even though but the patriarchal culture never changes, as Dr. Sirin Ebadi mentioned. So we need to think about how much backlashes are there when we change the our culture. But at the same time, after the revision of law, we need to ponder upon how we can change the patriarchal culture in our society. So we need to resolve this. And this is the only way for us to realize the female rights, and the economy should be democratized. In parallel with this, Korean female movement should be going toward this direction as well. Thank you very much. And what about Dr. Shirin Ebadi? So the patriarchal culture should be overcome. So why should we overcome this patriarchal culture, and what would be the remaining challenges here?
Respond to your question. कानून
Okay. So when we talk about the law, we see that laws do two things. First is to bring public order. The second thing is to change the culture. In reality, when the law is appropriate for that society, then we can change the culture. But how are we going to do that? Just think about the laws pertaining to women's rights in Scandinavian countries. We know that in Scandinavian countries they have equal rights. If we want to implement these laws in a country like Saudi Arabia, the society is not going to change. Not even women can change overnight. Therefore, something else has to happen. All these sociologies have to take in mind the median of the culture of the society. And the laws have to be a step higher than the culture of the society. Then the society can change in a little while. They take one step higher. Then the law should change again and go up another step, meaning like it's step by step that changes are made. And therefore, after a short while, cultures will change. This is what the law has to do. I'll give you an example. Prior to the 1979 revolution in my country, Iran, how the laws changed the culture. Years ago, like 100 years ago in Iran, men could marry 4 wives. But approximately 65 years ago, they wanted to change this law. Naturally, if they said that from tomorrow you can only have 1 wife, what would happen to all these women who were the 2nd, 3rd, or 4th wife of this man? And men could not accept that easily. So what they did was they did it step by step. So they said that you can marry a 2nd wife, but you need the permission of the court. Also, when you go to court, you have to prove to court why is it that you want to marry a 2nd wife. For example, can't your wife conceive? Can't you have children with your wife? And more importantly, you had to prove to the court that you could support both women, so that if you didn't have money, you couldn't actually marry more wives. So it was like limiting the rights of men so that they couldn't marry 4 wives. After a few years, when the culture of the society changed a little bit, the law changed, and they said that if the courts approves the 2nd marriage of the man, then the wife had the right to divorce. And the man has to support her financially. So what happened, it made it very difficult for men to marry a 2nd wife. And it was actually not very well accepted if a man married a 2nd wife. Whereas like a few years prior to that, it was like a value to have more than 1 wife. Unfortunately, what the bad thing that happened was that when the revolution, Islamic revolution happened, one of the laws that were changed right away was the fact that men could marry 4 wives. I remember at that time, I wrote an article which made a lot of noise. So what I said was, is the revolution for just marrying 4 wives? But we were talking about democracy. Instead of democracy, we're only marrying 4 wives. So one of the tensions that exist in Iran now is that the culture of the society is at a higher level than our laws, meaning that our laws are at a lower level. So, like my colleague who has been a minister of women in Korea, I want to say that laws have to change the culture of a society.
네.
Thank you very much. And actually, I have one thing to give you. Actually, your answer should be limited to 2 to 3 minutes. 2 to 3 minutes. And also, I would like to invite 2 more panelists, and I will hand over my microphone to the floor. And Liberia and Colombia have shared commonalities in women's participation in process model. They serve as a good model, and Lima Boy once mentioned that in 2000, and the participation of women in peace process making and protection of women was well reflected in UNCSCR Resolution 1325. It marks 22nd anniversary, and the youth should be engaged in the peace-building process. And the UNSCR Resolution 2250 was ratified and took in effect, and the participation of the youth and the female should be ensured. And this is unanimously passed in the UN's General Assembly. Despite this fact, the militarized security and the military issues are male dominant, and this kind of stereotypes still existing here. So in peace building process, successful participation of women should be supported by the fact that what kind of important points should be allocated in the process, not in the result. So this is my question.
Okay, the most important process, so when the women participate, the first is these women has the leadership role model, because many times the women participate but don't have the all decisions or the level decisions. So the first time is has the level decision, top level decision. The second fact, continue leading. For example, in Colombia, is the first time we have a Afro-descendant vice president women. So each more times we leading more women participate is not only in the peace processes, participate in political process. So because in political process has decision. So we need to more women in politician. So we need more women in the peace processes, but we need more women take a decision. Take a decision in director decision has a decision. So, and another fact is mobilizing all stakeholders. Because many times the women go into the peace processes or building peace or participate in another processes, but don't have the skills or don't have the opportunities, for example, access to the financial states or financial, for example, the local leaders building peace, many times mobilizing all the stakeholders but don't have opportunities to access the financial. So the most important and the fact is we need to mobilize on all the stakeholders, yes, but we need to integrate all the stakeholders and give more opportunities for the local leaders in our countries, because this base or these local leaders finally is mobilizing all community. And another thing, you say that change culture, society, is more important that these women participate in these peace processes, mobilizing change culture in our society. But not only change a culture, is sensibility, the culture, and give these opportunities and another women to access and participate in political, in the take a decision, the most important.
네. 네, 박수
Please give a big round of applause. We will now turn to Lima Boy, and Ms. Chung will also make the last comment.
I think she said it all in terms of the need for women to be involved in the various processes. But I just want to come back to the citing Resolution 1325. Since 22 years ago, when we got that resolution, we were very excited. After 1325, there were other resolutions that have come for protecting women's rights. Today, a lot of those resolutions sit, and we really, I think one of the need that women have today is the need for consistency. We celebrate at the international level. We celebrate milestones, but we never really follow through our milestones. So 1325 is there. We enjoy that we have these things. But if you look at all of the peace processes, women continue to be left out. The first meeting, I won't call it a peace process, for Russia and Ukraine, if you saw that picture, you would think it was a picture from 100 years ago. All men in suits. And when you hear people talk about Russia, Ukraine, or even in Ukraine, they talk about the conflict, you never really hear a lot about the things women were doing. In June, when we're in Ukraine, 80% of the women on the train as conductors, 85% of the conductors on trains in Ukraine are women. These were people who are doubling over as conductors, making sandwiches, helping people who were in labor and all of that. So the need to include women, again, cannot be overstated, but the need for women at the international level to continue sustain advocacy so that all of these international instruments we have can continue to be applicable or relevant to what we do today is calling for us to do it now. 1325, we can't just say National Action Plan. Let's work on it. Let's make CEDAW something that anyone can touch. We just finished 16 days of activism. Let's look for tangible things to show at the international level that we're doing. I think that's my...
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much. Now let me turn to Ms. Chung. I would like to add a comment. Changing laws and regulations, of course, can change culture. However, there are limitations. So in order to make a change in culture, I believe democracy, education, not just for women, but also for men, is important. Second, when it comes to the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, let me share my experience. In Korea, we have national action plan to implement this resolution. And when I was a minister, I created the second round of the national action plan, and it was not spontaneous. The women made lots of effort to create this action plan. And when I was a minister, we changed many things, and we gathered all the ministers, and we put pressure to the ministers to make a change in other departments and ministries. So as a minister, I felt many limitations. So how is very important. And third, 10 years ago, when President Roh Moo-hyun was in office, there was a gender-based statistics, And we requested these statistics to the Ministry of Unification. At the time, the South Korean government provided financial support to the DPRK. And in that project, we wanted to know how many women are participating in these programs, because I thought that many men are participating in this program, but women have limitation in participating in this program. So I requested the gender-based statistics to the Ministry of Unification. I made repeated requests, however, it didn't get to the Minister of Unification, so I was not able to obtain the statistics. So I believe financial pressure is also very important. And in Korea, we have advisory committee, and in most of the advisory committees, the women account for more than 30%. However, when it comes to the working level, it is very difficult to create a department dedicated to women. We are failing again and again, so we are making requests continuously. Thank you very much.
지속
So sustainable, at the same time, follow-up actions are made. And in order for us to carry out this, we need to put investment on capital, human capital, and the natural resources. And I would like to hand over my microphone to the floor to raise their questions to the panels. Is there any question from the floor? So raise your hand, then so that we can identify you. And so also you need to identify and make clear to whom you need to throw your question to. And actually the light is shining right now, so I am not able to see your faces on the floor. But is there any questions on the floor? Please raise your hand so that we can identify you. It seems no question from the floor. Then it's my role to ask another question to the panels. So this is one way proceeding. However, anyhow, for the interest of time, I would like to throw the last question. And I believe that this question is very relevant to the last session.
In 2022 May, the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute released a report. The title of the report is The Environment of Peace, Security in a New Era of Risk, saying that the world is entering into the era of new risk. And in this report, as mentioned by many speakers, the report covers COVID-19 pandemic and compounded crisis of war and the environmental crisis. So our immediate action and efforts are required. So we need to make a just and peaceful transition, and we also need to include the stakeholders who are impacted by this crisis in the discussion. Due to the armed conflict of many countries, many people are dying, and as mentioned by speakers, many people are dislocated. And now, many countries are militarized. And due to this, the greenhouse gas emission is also increasing. And very unfortunately, 2020, we suffered the COVID-19. And during that time, military expenditure has increased. And for the first time in history, military expenditure exceeded $2 trillion. At the moment, we are faced with climate crisis and compounded crisis. So the role of women is very much important. So what kind of preparation is required? We would like to briefly turn to the speakers. And I think we have one question from the floor, so we'll cover that after this. So let me first turn to Ms. Chung. After COVID-19 pandemic, now we are more talking about community. As for the climate crisis and economic inequality. In order to address them, we need to restructure our society. In order to do that, we need to have collective discussion and collective wisdom. In the last presidential election in Korea, most of the women in 20s and 30s support the liberal parties. In other words, after COVID-19, many people feel unstable and they recognize the need for change. There should be more labor rights for the poor people, and climate crisis should be addressed. So I believe women are very sensitive to this issue. So yesterday there was a comment about communication, and social media is very good media. By utilizing this, we need to gather all the opinions and make a request to the society. And if needed, we need to gather together so that we can raise our voices for the alternate society.
네, 부탁드립니다.
Yes, please go ahead.
Can you repeat the question, please?
네.
So, climate crisis and the gender inequality and economic inequalities are accelerated these days. Our society has gone through multiplied crises. So, climate change has implications on the role of women, and the militarization is closely related to these issues. So, what kind of new role of women should be played? What kind of role should women play in this multiplied risks era?
I think so. The new role, for example, for the women when leading the crisis climate, is more women mobilizing and more women create the programs to defend the climate or change climate. So the role for these women is not only mobilizing, is create, leading, and acting international voices. It's not only in her countries. So the new role model is these women mobilizing and going to elevate these voices and try to integrate the governments, the private sector, because the private sector has an important role in this crisis. So more women mobilizing, more women create, more women amplify these voices with private sector, public sector, NGOs is the principal role. But these women need amplify more voices, don't have a voices. So now, for example, in the world, I think so 3 weeks ago, the COP in Egypt, so say it's like more women fighting in the crisis, climate crisis, is one planet, more safety. So we need more women fighting why the change and climate crisis.
네, 고맙습니다.
Thank you for your insightful remarks. And Dr. Sirin Ebadi, could you give us your opinion?
All communities are comprised of two sections, women and men. How can we change the culture with half of the people in a society? What I'm saying is that men who have had better education, who are occupying better positions, and women who have been told that they need to stay home and rear children, and this has resulted in inequality. In order to fight the inequality and bring equality for women and men, in addition to good laws that we need, we have to create a situation where appropriate laws can be implemented. For example, if we say that in the law women can occupy positions and also when they have free time that they can be participants in political parties, then the issue of children will come up. What are we going to do with the children? So I think this is the duty of the government to create daycares and also kindergartens with very little tuition for kids so that women will have free time. Women will have free time and use the opportunities. Not until women have these conditions, they cannot participate because they're mothers. So we have to create time. So that's why I always say, after educating women, we need to have daycares or kindergartens, either free of charge or with very little tuition, so that women can leave their children there and use their time in order to participate in the society.
Thank you very much. And Libabue, please.
I think if we're talking about addressing all of the crises that we have, from climate crisis to other things, a major area that we have to focus on is partnership. A lot is being done by women everywhere. And she just mentioned when Egypt, there were many women at the conference talking about different things. But what we see in our world is everyone is operating in silo. My strategy is better than this strategy. My region strategy is better than that strategy. And I think for us to really come together, put partnership at the core of everything we do, then we'll begin to see the kind of success that we need to see. But I think partnership is the key word in everything we do.
네, 감사.
Thank you very much. We had one question, but we are out of time, so the question will be addressed individually. Now, as mentioned by the speaker, we need to have a partnership. In 2010, in Pyongyang, Lima Boy came to Korea and with Gloria Steinem.
말씀해 주셔서
And also, Glarsen says that the stronger we together with participant women. And what we learned from this session is that the changing the world is related to the fact that we need to bring a new and fresh perspective to what we have taken for granted. And furthermore, unvisualized. Also, we need to pay attention to those whose voices are unheard. And when we pay attention to this, then real peace can be established in a meaningful way. And also, we already knew that deeply rooted historical conflicts are never resolved overnight. And every single step is meaningful. And our wall of mind should be broken down, and we need to be living in solidarity, and we need to recognize that we are connected with each other. Then this is a prerequisite for us to walk on the path of the genuine peace. And furthermore, we should be a peace building maker. And through this session, I am able to be taught that someone will be another version of Lima Bowie, Sirin Ebadi, or another version of Chung Yeon-bae, or another version of Ladia. So you will be the role model for the future version of yourself to the younger women and girls. So advanced her story and history should be met with each other so that our history will be changed its course. So this is what I learned from this session. And last but not least, and for those who work day and night behind the scene should receive my appreciation. So technical support and other support should be attributable to your efforts. And Jasmine and Pierre, special thanks goes to you all. And also our simultaneous interpreters who are responsible for our communication, who sit in the isolated booth and try their best for communicating what you are saying. Those interpreters should deserve my recognition as well. And actually, I would like to introduce to you the scarf that I brought with me. And this scarf, as you all aware of, is colorful with different colors. And I think this should be opposite side. And this scarf has different colors with different patch, but the colors never fade and they go well in harmony, and also their colors are well represented. So participation of women in the peace building process means leaving no women behind. And also we need to shine the light on the lives of women, leaving no one behind. This will be the genuine path to build peace. And with the 4 participants and panelists, would like to take a group photo with holding this patch, and would like to conclude this session. Thank you very much for your participation, and thank you for sharing with us your ideas. Thank you very much. Would like to have a group photo with holding this patchwork together.
Thank you very much, speakers and moderator, for an amazing session. So now we will move on to the next forum, Thematic Forum 2, on climate change and peace. But before we do that, we're gonna watch a very short video that is about Sing for Hope. So after watching the video, we'll move on straight to Thematic Forum 2, Climate Change and Peace. So please be seated. We will watch the video right now.
Hi, I'm Camille Zamora.
And I'm Monica Yunus, and together we are the co-founders of Sing for Hope. Sing for Hope's mission is simple: to create a better world through the arts. And today that's more important than ever. We are so proud to be the official cultural partners of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates.
At Sing for Hope, we believe that to create a better world, you must first envision it. And there is no tool more powerful for honing the imagination than the arts. That's particularly true when the arts are practiced by our young people. So for that reason, we thought that the perfect tribute that we could offer today to you all, the assembled laureates, is an artistic tribute by our youth. This is the International Foundation for Arts and Culture Handa Harmony Sing for Hope Youth Chorus, performing a tremendous anthem written by Jennifer Walsey. It is a charge to you all, the laureates, today. Dream big, speak loud.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's good to see you all. And from now on, I'd like to begin the thematic session 2 under the theme of climate and Korean Peninsula's peace. And I believe simultaneous interpretation is provided, so please select the preferred language, Korean and English. And I am moderator Lee Sung-hoon, Regional Coordinator of APSD, Asia Civil Society Partnership for Sustainable Development. As you can see in this program, we have 3 panelists. And the previous panel session discussed the climate risks serving as a new risks for security, and it is not confined to one country. It is global phenomenon, and global crisis responses are topic of the conferences, and also solutions and are found out. And this session will be an opportunity for us to take stock of climate change in the perspective of peace on the Korean Peninsula. But parallel with this, denuclearization of the North is one issue, and military tensions are the issues. On top of that, this is not an expansion of these issues. So climate change can be related to the existing risks on the Korean Peninsula, and climate change might not be negative solely. This can be serving as a new momentum for peace. So actually, the title has game changer. So can the climate change be a game changer? So rather than academic orientation, we need to enlarge our imagination on this. So there might be a newly coined terms with regards to peace and climate change, and at the same time detailed direction. So this is what we have prepared for, and we have invited 3 panels. So I would like to introduce 3 panels. And first, Yoon Jong-soo, co-representative from Green Koreanite, will talk about the climate crisis, and also the panelist is solely involved in climate crisis, and Chung Uk-sik, representative from Peace Network and director of Hangyare Peace Institute. And also he is the most renowned expert in Korean Peninsula, writing a lot of books and lectures as well. And the third panel is Lee Jong-uk, former representative of Women's Forum for Peace and Democracy, as well aware of actually the former Minister of Gender, Equality and Family was participating in this session. And Pyeongchang Peace Center's director was also another job that he holds. And varied activities are where he is deeply involved in. And with the participation of 3 panelists, we try to make a seamless discussions with climate change, peace, and its action and implementation. So first and foremost, I would like to hand my microphone over to the Yoon Jong-soo, co-representative, and she prepares for PowerPoint slide decks for 15 minutes. And after that, the panels will follow. Please, the floor is yours. Could you please deliver her a remote controller? You can have your presentation on chair, so you are able to see the slide deck. And please utilize the remote controller. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, I am Yoon Jong-suk. And today, I would like to talk about the peace and climate crisis, and also militarism and its relationship with climate risks, and what kind of perspectives that Korean Peninsula should have. And this will be the topic. And the subtitle is Green Détente. Green Détente is not a concept that I coined and created. Actually, the Korean government 15 years ago created and started this concept, and also Lee Myung-bak administration talked about this crisis, and officially Park Geun-hye administration officially coined this term. But the President Yoon also put much emphasis on the realization of Green Détente as a national agenda. So President Yoon put much emphasis on the Green Détente and its implementation. And I would like to talk about the Korean Peninsula community of climate shared community. So actually, greenhouse gas emissions are never stopped. And when we take Korean Peninsula as a community of shared destiny, we are able to realize Green Détente and prevent climate crisis. So actually, trans-border cooperation is in dire need. So Korean Peninsula's peace and survival is required for Korean Peninsula's peace, survival, and trust for the next generations, and in response to existing climate crisis, and for the best optimized climate actions and responses. So we try to think about Korean Peninsula as a community of shared community in terms of climate. And actually, from the very northern part of the Korean Peninsula and to the very southern part of the Korean Peninsula, Baekdu Mountain runs through. And these disasters are not new. So many media outlets said that the potential of extinctions and the death of the pine trees and the gray mountains, and the pine trees and other trees will left to death by being dried out. And on your left side, you can see the Baekdu Mountains. And from the Halla Mountain to Tsira Mountain, pine trees are dying right now. And we're not able to calculate this accurately, but this phenomenon goes to the north. And so this can be addressed by inter-Korean cooperation. As you can see, this forest area in the north is decreasing right now because the forestry or woods are cut down for fuel stocks, and there will be no appropriate forestry plans in the north. And as you can see from this slide, that on your right side hand, there might be differences between the north and the south with regards to the concentration of woods and greenery zones and the forest. So there is a change brought by climate change on forestry. And the normalization of intercurrent relationship and the preparation for the unification with the participation of people. And this is one of the national agenda that the President Moon has put forth. And among 112 national agenda, this is one of the agenda. So the only thing to do is to implement this. And this is the future direction for realization of Green Detente. And the realization of inter-Korean Green Detente is what we have said, and sustainability and cooperation based in border areas such as DMZ areas, and analysis on ecosystem and preservation and conservation of this ecosystem. At the same time, the Korean government has increased the awareness on the existing plans on the Green Detente and its pursuit. So they already have detailed plans. So the only thing we need to do is to cooperation between the private and public sector. The only thing to do is to implement, but there is no detailed plans and mention for the Green Detente. This is a stark reality. And also in the north and the south, NDC was put forth, as you can see, in the Paris Climate Agreement and Kyoto Protocol. The two Koreas ratified and signed it, and 30% and 40% of NDC are what the two Koreas presented. But in order to realize this goal, inter-Korean relation is in dire need, and also we need to map out the practical ways, and also we need to earmark the budget with the support of policy schemes. And this is a very important task that we have. So there is no time for us to be sitting on our hands. And this year, actually, there is many of discussions for Green Detente in the Ministry of Unification in Korea with this theme. Private sector have gathered together on a monthly basis, have their seminars, and youth seminar is carried out, and also in the National Assembly, Green Detente, expert forum, and seminars are carried out. So this really means that from the national agenda of the Republic of Korea, the Green Detente remains as a open national agenda, and this is time for us to take a stock in this Green Detente. However, what we have to ponder upon is that we are talking about the Green Detente, but the annual increase in military expenditure is witnessed, and as you can see from the press conference, the Korea's military expenditure is 1.5 times higher than that North Korea's GDP. So you can see the ranking on here. So Korea is the top 10 economy powerhouse, top 10 greenhouse gas emissions, and per capita carbon emissions is putting Korea number 5 on the world. And we are the number 10 country which spends military expenditure. And also, we have surveyed 36 countries, and in 2020 climate change response index, we remain 16th ranking. When these decisions left unchecked, then going beyond the borders and going beyond the demarcation line, this will bring about an effect on the north. And especially the emissions from the military sector is increasing, and it's enormous and phenomenal. And climate change budget versus and the military budget in 2019, and there is a stark difference between the military expenditure and the climate action response, and the military expenditure is way more higher than that of climate response budget. And we are number 12 in the defense acquisition industry and in the military expenditure. However, so we need to pay attention to this. And also, this is the ranking. Out of 63 countries, Korea ranks 6th in climate response index. And last but not least, and Green Detente and the Committee of Climate on the Korean Peninsula, what we need to do to realize this. So let me pay attention to number 2, bullet point 2. So we have to couple Korean Peninsula's peace with climate justice. So peace building is a prerequisite for us to build climate justice, and also climate justice can be only achievable with the evergreen and genuine peace on the Korean Peninsula, and this is perspective and test that we are not able to turn our eye. And also, we need to conserve the Korean Peninsula ecosystem and the damaged areas. So we are not able to accurately measure how much areas are damaged, but inter-Korean relation allow us to map out detailed plans with accurate measurements. And the third, and COP27 was on platform to talk about the support for developing nations and the scope of developing nations is where South Korean government contributes to this fund, especially for the North. And this is the essential element in the Korean detente. And last but not least, with the many participations of experts, there is a common topic. So actually, Green Detente is a national agenda. Then, we need to establish public organization for cooperation to restore ecosystem and to respond to the climate change to realize Green Detente. So actually, we need to broaden our perspective to the Korean Peninsula level, and this is what we have as an open disclosure. And this is wrapping my presentation. Thank you very much. Thank you for your thought-provoking presentation. And actually, you have pointed out a lot of points, and it's very clear for us to understand what you are really want to say, and you save our time. Thank you very much. And a lot of time can be allocated to the discussions and the Q&A sessions. And for the perspective of students, I believe there are 4 keywords in your presentation. So the first is about the Green Detente, the term Green Detente, and the second is the Korean Peninsula climate community, and third is the peace and climate justice definition. So the climate justice and the peace, and the last but not least, the Korean Peninsula's ecosystem axis. So the venue is situated at the middle line of the Baekdu Mountains, and actually the nearest mountain is Ode Mountain here. And actually, when we liken to this, actually some people liken to this area as a belly of our body, and we are at the middle of Baekdu Mountain. So actually, it's very meaningful for us to take that kind of discussions with regards to ecosystem axis. And second presenter will be delivered by the second panelist, and in climate crisis and issues are the topic. You are given 15 minutes.
네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. This is very prestigious occasion, and thank you very much for the opportunity to make a presentation. Today, what I would like to talk about is military activity and the relation with climate crisis. On the Korean Peninsula, as Ms. Yoon said, the climate crisis is very evident, so Korean Peninsula is very vulnerable against climate crisis, but military activity is very active on the Korean Peninsula at the same time. And I believe these two elements are closely related. So when we make an approach to climate crisis and this crisis on the Korean Peninsula, we can take another approach. In the arms race and new Cold War era, climate crisis can serve as a game changer. We can have that kind of discourse. So with this wishful thinking, I'd like to start my presentation.
그래서 제가 표현을 한
As you can see on the right side, I believe a human being is like a frog in the pot. As you know very well, global warming is making the planet hotter and hotter, and arms race is heated. And these two issues are not separated from each other. This global warming and arms race is creating the vicious cycle. And Stephen Hawking paid attention to these relations early on. 10 years ago, he marked the 70th birthday, and he said that within just 1,000 years, the human being can be disappeared from the earth due to nuclear war or global warming. Some people said that this is exaggeration. However, when we look at the Ukraine war or global peace crisis, we can understand that we are reaching the tipping point, and it is the same for the climate crisis. So I believe now is the time to reconsider the warning of Dr. Stephen Hawking. For a long time, I've been engaged with peace activity, and I've been talking about the reduction of weapons, but it is getting harder and harder because this military is related to national security, and national security is very important nowadays. So many people ask back to me why I need to talk about this, but all humanity is living on the earth. And under the name of the national security, many countries are engaged with arms race and increasing their weapons. Then we can threaten the security of the planet where we are living on. If these two elements are intertwined, we need to think about this arms race once again. We aspire to be an advanced country in military, and I believe when we think about the relations between the two elements, this is the time to reconsider. So let's take a look at the carbon emissions. In the private sector, there is a pipeline, trains, maritime shipping, aviation. When we combine all these, still military activity emits more carbon, and it is increasing. So this is the current reality. Let me give you one more vivid example. Recently on the Korean Peninsula, we can see US bombers. And for 1 hour, it emits lots of carbon, which is almost equivalent to the 7-year worth of carbon emitted by vehicles. So there are so many strategic assets moving around the Korean Peninsula. So I'm wondering whether we need to welcome these strategic assets and bombers. So I believe now is the time to reconsider this. So let me briefly summarize this. There is a vicious cycle between arms race and climate crisis, and there are several elements. First, military activity is emitting lots of carbon.
군사 분야는 사각지대.
However, in the UN climate response, the military activity is an exception. Every year, many countries are reporting their carbon emission, but this emission from the military is optional, so it is not mandatory. And as you know very well, climate crisis is borderless. And the least responsible countries are getting the greatest damage from the climate crisis. And even developing countries need to make a transition to zero carbon and neutrality. Under this understanding, in 2018, the Paris Accord was agreed, and advanced countries decided to provide lots of financial resources to the developing countries. But that pledge has not been made yet. Is it because of the financial shortage? Across the world, the military budget is $2.2 to $2.3 trillion per year. And if we allocate only a fraction of this military budget, we can save the money for climate change. So if advanced countries can reduce only a fraction of the military budget, they can respond to the climate crisis. And this vicious cycle is getting severe and it is leading to the conflicts. So climate crisis is one of the main elements and cause of conflicts and division. And due to these conflicts and division, there will be more military activities and it will cause even more climate crisis. And many powerful countries are competing with each other for the hegemony. And due to this situation, international cooperation, which is necessary for the countermeasure against the climate crisis, is lacking. So now we need to ask, what is more important? The earth is turning into inhabitable land, and should we continue this meaningless competition? I believe we need to stop this meaningless competition and let us focus on the Korean Peninsula.
최근에 이제
Recently, as far as I remember, this autumn, even though we are not at war, there were many military activities. And in the process, the US and Korea conducted a vigilance storm operation for 6 days. And 260 planes participated in this military drill. So I calculated and estimated the emission of carbon, and according to my estimation, the emission was 5,000 tons of carbon, which is similar to the emission of 3,500 vehicles per year. And in order to address this or offset this, we need to plant 300,000 trees. In regards to the crisis on the crisis, I would like to tell you this. This crisis is becoming a new normal. In the past, intermittently, we experienced a crisis and then the crisis has been eased. But in the future, the military crisis will be a new normal. It is very likely. North Korea and the Raucous Alliance both say that power is the solution. So in the future, zero-sum game will be even more severe. So the Korean Peninsula crisis will be new normal. That's my diagnosis. And what is even more concerned is in the past, there was a mediator when the crisis and tension is building up. However, nowadays, it is very rare to see those mediators. Then, it is us who can address and mediate this Korean Peninsula crisis. And in order to do that, this arms race and military activity should be considered as an accelerator for climate crisis. In the future, in order to prevent the Korean Peninsula crisis, there should be many precautious measures. First, we need to prevent small conflicts. Now, the condition is ready. So if there is any small spark, it can turn into very large wildfire. So we need to prevent small conflicts. Many people say that we cannot live under the nuclear threat of the DPRK. So many people say that we need to take all the measures. But are we really considering all the measures? And when we consider these measures, why don't we postpone the rockets joint drill and have a dialogue? If we do not have this kind of dialogue, how can we achieve the turnaround in the DPRK-RK relations? Up until now, we pursued peace negotiation and peace regime through denuclearization, and next year will mark the 70th anniversary of the truce agreement, and this truce is continued for the last 70 years. This is not normal situation, and for the last 70 years, we tried to turn the truce into the end of the war, but there was no genuine negotiations. So it is very shameful. Up until now, we pursued this peace regime through denuclearization. However, now we need to pursue peace accord so that we can achieve genuine peace on the Korean Peninsula. In conclusion, this is not limited to the Korean Peninsula. When we think about the Cold War era, there was a paradox of the nuclear weapons. The emergence of nuclear weapon accelerated the Cold War. So this is ironic, and this nuclear weapon can kill everyone on the earth, and it also contributed to the end of the Cold War. In that sense, now and in the future, we need to think about the existential threats. Many people say that climate crisis is the existential crisis. So this climate crisis is not limited to the Korean Peninsula. Rather, on the global level, we need to take this climate crisis as a game changer. And just now, Ms. Yoon talked about green détente. And I believe this is very good name and this is a good initiative. But basically, through the cooperation in climate and environmental area, we want to cooperate between the two Koreas. It was the same for the Lee Myung-bak administration and Park Geun-hye administration. And it was the same for the Moon Jae-in administration and current administration. And we have failed, and it is likely that we will fail in the future because on the Korean Peninsula, military issue is very much important. In this sense, we need to understand and look clearly what is the reality, and we also think about alternative options. Through the climate crisis, we need to achieve détente. So, if the feasibility of green détente is very low, then we need to first pursue the reduction of the weapons, and we will refrain from using weapons, and then we can create a virtuous cycle in climate crisis. So this approach is very important in the future. As I mentioned before, now the earth is turning into inhabitable land. So we need to stop the meaningless competition. We need to tell this to many countries around the world, especially the powerful countries. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
그래서 역시
And thank you very much. And these complicated concepts and issues are well addressed and clearly thought to me when we have experts. And from my perspective, I have picked 4 keywords from his presentation. So I first talk about the game changer, and also there is a zero sum, and this is a vicious cycle. So I can turn this vicious cycle into a virtuous cycle. And so the background of the coined term and listening to his presentation taught me that several years ago, and in the movie called Koksong, there is a famous line, what is the important issue here in Korea? So actually we need to directly get down to the business and the core gist. And adversary coexistence, expenditure on military activities, and rather than race for security, actually we are able to pursue coexistence with paradigm shift. Of course, several years ago in Pyeongchang Winter Olympic, there will be a peace atmosphere, and many people pin high expectations on this. But Singapore and Hanoi summit are failed without any reaping fruits, and we turning back to the pre-Pyeongchang Winter Olympic era. So what would be the heartland lessons here? Actually, at the time, there was no serious talk on climate change, but the security threat and nuclear threat on the Korean Peninsula and climate change can be linked together so that we can hone our imagination to take a deep analysis on our failure, that we are able to create a new momentum. And 2040 강원 Olympic booth is established, and this is not a large Olympic, but a small Olympic for the youth. So we are able to utilize that Olympic to create another momentum of peace building. So this is one thing that I want to draw from your presentation. Thank you for your presentation. And next, so coupling with this too, how can we do? So actually they are not from the government officials. So as a civil member and as a representative from the people and as the youth, and also and we have been joined by many people from home and abroad. So how can we go global, and also how can we address these issues in the perspective of Korea global affairs? And Professor Lee will deliver presentation for 15 minutes.
It is great honor to share my short ideas with all the delegates who have devoted their lives for the peace. So I think it is the 18th World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureate Gangwon. So I was emphasized the 18th and Gangwon. It is very specialties. And the 18th means this summit had started in the beginning stage of 21st century. And the Gangwon is the very specialties which have hosted this some kind of a global event. So my presentation is also related with this kind of specialties and the universalities in relation with the climate crisis and the peace in Korean Peninsula. Because this session was designed for the Korean audience to share the global view with the Korean local situation. So that's why I will speak in Korean. So first
and foremost, the Korean Peninsula that we are living in is marked on the globe-shaped planet. And so I would like to share with you this information. So on this globe, you are able to understand that our situations are not confined to our own efforts. This is a globe shape, so everything is not a constant but a changeable issue. And on that note, so Korean Peninsula issues are multi-layered issues. So on a global level, on a regional level, or on a Pyeongchang region level, on the Asian level, or on a Northeast Asian level. So these issues are multi-layered issues. And in the Northeast Asia particularly, everyone has held specialty, but in every aspect or several aspect, 300 to 400 long globalization was started from the Western world, and also Northeast Asia is far from this region geographically, and it holds specialty on that ground. So Korea, for the short period of time, has experienced a shorter period of colonial rule by colored skin a country, and also China also experienced the half or quasi colonial era. So we have specialty in the Northeast Asia. So these three countries, so-called, experienced the G20, G70, G20, G7, OECD. So they are easily able to be joined by these G7, G8, G20, and OECD. In particular, I draw your attention to the experiences on the Korean Peninsula. And also, Dr. Shireen Ebadi mentioned that we have experienced a marvelous economic growth, but at the same time, from the colonial rule to the Cold War to the Korean War and to the current situation, so-called two superpowers rivalry, and Korea are wedged between the two, so like a sandwich, and also 70-year-long truce situation are all boil down to the Korea specialty and uniqueness. And this colonial rule era, Cold War, post-Cold War, UN system, and we have shared the axis of international system, and we constitute our own uniqueness, and this is what made Korea so far these days. And two speakers before me mentioned that we have solution, but we are not able to move toward the clear solution. And also, this is what I have concerns as well. And in case of Korea, we are the best example of the modernization. And also, socialist and the social researcher Wallerstein says that the modernization, actually, market capitalism or the socialism are the culmination of this modernization. So we have, in particular, cultural domain, tradition, and modern things upon our necessary. We have constitute despotism or patriarchal culture upon our needs. We arbitrarily draw clear contour in Korea. However, we like to talk about the economic development as one axis, and we reap fruits. So we are trapped by the trap of success. So we are experiencing the dismantlement of community that is unvisualized, and higher suicidal thoughts, and the conflict between the youth generation and the existing generation, and large buildings and skyrocket building, and innovative technological advancements are towering over these kind of issues. But what we'd like to put much emphasis on here is that on a global level, the paradigm shifts is now transpiring. And on the every aspect, going beyond the development, we use sustainable development as a term, or global governance, or other changes are witnessed. And so paradigm shift, because of the trap of success, is not able to be transpired. We are a little bit late in shifting our paradigm because of the trap. And in terms of the global governance, human rights are put at the front burner, and there is a Washington consensus. So human violators will be subject to the global intervention, and climate change, carbon tax, and climate governance are already mapped out. There are many reforms and rules on the climate responses. Human rights, and previous speaker before me said that military races are never securing the peace. So this is unacceptable. So the concept of development should be turned into the sustainable development. So this is a way for mutual existence. So coupled with division ideology, we are not able to accept this kind of concept. And now we are living under the military security, but we still have talked about the positive security and human security, but these kind of concepts are lost in Korean society. But NGO or the liberal organizations are accepting this concept, but on a layman level, on a government level, this is not acceptable. So on a global level, there are many activities to achieve carbon neutrality and climate justice. So trade or indirect or direct sanctions are underpinned by this, and we are late in accepting this concept because manufacturing industry, which is a highly carbon intensive industry, this brought us benefits. So over the night, we are not able to change this manufacturing industry, carbon intensive industry into green industry.
합니다. 그 지구촌의 입장에
So on the globe, the climate crisis is not the environmental issue, rather it is related to food security and climate refugee, and it is also related to civil war. So climate crisis is closely related to peace, but still on the Korean Peninsula, we still believe that we are notorious as heavy emitter, and this implication is huge. However, we are indifferent, and when it comes to the Korean Peninsula, as I mentioned about Palestine, both DPRK and RK competed with economic development and military activities. So both DPRK and RK cause climate crisis. I'm not an expert in the DPRK, so I will focus on the Republic of Korea. Many journalists say that we are industrialized generation or old generation. So in the past, we focused on the manufacturing sector by emitting lots of carbons. But centering around the UN, now the concept of sustainable development, human security, and climate justice have been adopted. So new paradigm emerged. So between these two camps, we can see the South-South conflicts. So the priority for us is adopting this global governance actively. By doing so, we need to address the intra conflict, and we need to avoid this conflict to be escalated. That is our priority. And as President Yoon mentioned, climate crisis is very serious in the DPRK as well, even though there is no actual report, because North Korea is pursuing economic development. In the process, they also experienced deforestation and many other damages. So for the carbon credit, North Korea needs to make more investment for forestation. So for that area, I believe we can have an opportunity to cooperate between the two Koreas. On the Korean Peninsula, when we try to achieve peace, it is not just our people, rather we need to contribute to the global society by having peace on the Korean Peninsula. And we also need to talk about a new framework. We need to contribute actively, and that framework should be actively adopted. That is the way forward in that sense. Even though we are a emerging country, we are accepting actively DAC. So instead of focusing on the development-oriented ODC, we would like to expand the new paradigm in ODA to strengthen the South-to-South cooperation. So here, South-to-South cooperation means the cooperation on the global level on the Southern Hemisphere. And at the government level, we also need to focus on the direction of the education. New order should be actively adopted in the global citizenship education. Human rights is not just for the rich people. Rather, this is a way or new paradigm for coexistence. So human rights, peace, and climate agenda should be accepted enough, and instead of focusing on competition in education or education only for the jobs, rather we need to educate people for coexistence and cooperation. So this change of course in education is very much urgent. That is way forward. And already many attempts is being done by the government and NGOs, and the government also mentioned that global citizenship education will be emphasized in the future. Through this global citizenship education, in Asia and on the global level, we need to expand our global partnership to achieve sustainable development. This is implicit forecast. So we need to achieve sustainable development as soon as possible. With my students, with my next generation, I went to Berlin and I found the legacy of the Berlin Wall, which fell in 1989. Many people envy Germany's unification. That's why I took this photo. Between the two Koreas, there is no border in nature. So I took this picture by myself, and I'm also participating in the forestation in Mongolia. As a global citizen, we need to actively work on this, and educational revolution is very urgent. With this, I would like to conclude my presentation. Thank you very much. So you studied for a long time in school, so that's why I believe you're an expert in summarization within just 15 minutes. So as a student, I also summarized with several keywords. Previously, speakers talked about climate crisis and peace in a framework of the DPRK and RK. But now we have two-pronged strategy. So one side is related to the global level, and another side is the Korean Peninsula. This cannot be addressed by the Korean Peninsula alone. We need to address the conflict within the country, and at the same time, we also need to address the problem on the global level. So public diplomacy has been emphasized, and ODA is also important. For the Korean Peninsula, we need international cooperation, but instead of just asking for cooperation from the international society, we need to contribute to the global society through ODA for many global issues. And we need to consolidate and achieve solidarity on the global level. Then as a partnership, we can address this global crisis. And this Korean Peninsula peace should be addressed by the Korean people. But at the same time, I believe this Korean Peninsula issue is the essence of the global issue. So your presentation was very helpful to understand this multidimensional aspect. So now we had the presentations from the experts, and this is the topic we would like to talk. So if there is any question or comments, please raise your hand. You can speak in English or Korean, and please identify yourself before making any comments. Then we would like to have a group discussion.
If you want to ask any question, please raise your hand and we'll give the microphone. Please identify yourself before you ask question. Anybody? Yes, please.
Hi, thank you so much. Leonardo Del Fanti from Italy. I'm a journalist. I would like to ask which is the role that the young people can have in the issue that you just addressed. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. 자, 질문 하나, 청년의 역할.
So the first question is about the role of the young people.
제가 빛 때문에 잘 안 보이는데 혹시 손을 들어 주시고
Please raise your hand if you have any question.
그 기다리는 동안 제가 관련된 거 한두 개 더 같이 하면서
While waiting for other questions, we would like to continue our discussion. Actually, this is the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. And when it comes to Nobel Peace Laureates, there will be young people as well as old and seasoned people. So this is a global network. And we just had a discussion about nuclear issue, peace, and climate crisis. When you look at the list of the Nobel laureates, this is not just the peace. There are so many human rights activists and environmentalists as well. So it is very intertwined issue. So we also would like to talk about not just the role of the young people, but also the role of the Nobel Peace Laureates. All of you were young people, and I believe in your mind you are very young still. So if you can become younger, what kind of role can you play? We have 200 young people participating in this workshop, even though they are not here in this room. But if you have any recommendation, please go ahead. So please, Jung-Wook-sik, please go ahead. Since I'm young, I would like to answer first. Well, when it comes to the role of the young people, I think they need to score the older people, including me. As I mentioned before, I'm not sure the situation of other countries, but in Korea, young people, compared to the older generation, young people are more sensitive to climate crisis. They take this very serious. But at the same time, among young people, there are so many people who like weapons. So we call them as military mania. So I think this can be a good discussion topic. Our young people and teenagers will live on this earth longer than me. For that very reason, they are very sensitive to climate crisis in a way. And at the same time, compared to older generation, some young people like weapons. So they have concerns over climate crisis and they also love weapons. Then can they go together on this topic with young people and teenagers? I think we can have a discussion together. In that discussion, we can understand what is their thinking. I'm not in a position to tell what kind of role teenagers or young people need to play. Rather, they need to have many discussions, and the relation between climate crisis and weapons can be a good discussion topic, I think.
Thank you very much for your answer. And Professor Yun. And I believe the same situations are here in Korea. global generation is emerging. Climate citizen or climate generation are emerging, which means there is no actually within the 10 to 15 years, teenagers and those in their 20s are witnessing an increase in emergence of climate generation. And actually they are the key player to change our paradigm, and they are the active player these days. Teenagers and the youth under 20s and among the US Native Americans, they are talking about the ecosystem, and we are now witnessing a climate generation. And also we have teenagers who pay much attention to ecosystem, and also we have climate crisis response and emergency action organization, and they decided to be with the adults. And in Korea, those over 60s, so actually there is organization which consists of those on over 60s, and so the youth and climate generation activities are going further and further. And also they are well aware and familiar with how to connect with the global people than the older generation. And on the day of the World Climate Action Day, I was impressed by the fact that the teenagers and those under in their 20s took to the street to have great performance, and also they mixed with adults. So the youth, climate generation, and climate citizen should be the focus of our attention. Their voices should be raised. So as an older generation and as a responsibility holder for climate crisis, we need to be their buttress and their supporter for climate generation. And Barenboim is the famous conductor, and Israel and Palestine youth are gathered together to jointly perform, and also their performance alternate in Israel and in Palestine. So I was very impressed by the documentary. So we need to meet, and the youth in the north and the south should meet. So conversation among adults on the Panmunjom is not enough. So younger generations are aspiring for freedom, and climate crisis will be an existential threat to the younger generation. So they should be meet with each other. So on the southern part of the DMZ or on the northern part of the DMZ, why don't we get them to gather together to sing along together, such as Arirang? So shout out. So even though they are not visible with each other, but we are at the same time in the same place to sing along with the same song. Even though that, what about why don't we meet in China or in Mongolia? So Woman Cross DMZ documentation taught me that they directly went to the north and met with women, and actually the sense of peace is very different. So this is why younger generation from the north and from the south should meet with each other, and as a key player in peace building, they should realize that we are in the same chapter and we are the future hoarder. So they have to share the commonalities with support of a garden variety of programs and opportunities. And this is where older generations came into being. Thank you very much.
Next, panelist Lee Jung-wook. When I think about Korean history, I always think of the 19th century. At the end of the 19th century, the elite people prepared for the national officer examination, and if they have good calligraphy skill, they can become high position. But unexpectedly, Joseon dynasty collapsed and new era arrived, and those people who converted to Christianity or who can speak in English can hold the highest position. So the time has changed out of sudden. And at the end of one era, if people follow the old paradigm, they cannot be successful. And now we can see the tectonic shift. So including me, older generation can tell our future generation what will be the future direction, but that can be wrong. But still, many older generations still say that this is the way for the younger generation. Even they force their way, but do not trust the older generation. In that experienced in the COVID-19, in a state, we cannot ensure our individual security. And the government may not be able to control the situation. So younger generation first need to understand this. So you need to understand that you are not a national citizen, rather you are a global citizen. And if you do not pay attention to the matters important, your health, your jobs, your families cannot enjoy the security. In that sense, I believe the first virtue you need to have is on the globe, there were many tragedies, including Holocaust. And amidst this, finally we achieved United Nations. And based on the United Nations, we established the basic rights and human rights. And all the members of the United Nations now have one vote. So you need to strengthen this, and you also need to accept multiple cultures. Even for the North Pole and the Southern Pole, you need to embrace all other culture as well. That is the virtue as a young generation you need to have. And the moderator also asked about a question, what is the role of Nobel Peace Laureates? Today, so many Nobel Peace Laureates gathered here in Pyeongchang, and they took lots of time to talk about their stories and their future. So I'm very honored to be part of this. And when they received their Nobel Peace Prize, at the time, they dedicated their lives, and instead of avoiding the issue, they faced the issue. That's why the international society recognized their efforts. That's why they became the Nobel Peace Laureates. So for the next generation, and for the divided generation, Nobel Peace Laureates need to open up the dialogue. That is the role of the Nobel Peace Laureates. So Nobel Peace Laureates need to use their position to open up the dialogue. And the last comment I would like to mention is consumerism. I believe you have the brainwash of consumerism. The marketing scheme is very sophisticated. So in order to protect your life, you need to make effort by yourselves. Instead of just focusing on luxurious goods, you need to focus on your own life.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much. So we have listened to experiences and wisdom from 3 panelists. As I mentioned before, the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureate is co-organized by Pyeongchang City, and at this very venue, there have been Pyeongchang Peace Forum for 4 years, which invited a large group of the younger generation. And all these peace efforts and the efforts made by SWS and PL will create a win-win or synergy effect. And now the fourth edition of Pyeongchang Peace Forum invited a lot of young people, and they described DMZ as this is actually for demilitarized zone, but they dream place for NZ generation. This is a new name for DMZ. But we are not able to meet those from the north. So we need to make youth from the two Koreas meet at the DMZ to talk about dreams of Gen Z and hopes and dreams of Gen Z. So we need to turn this place into that kind of place. But this is only a pipe dream. So Nobel Peace Laureates went to DMZ and they returned back to South Korea without any conversation. But this single piece of effort will pay the efforts, and also we are able to freely move back and forth in north and in south. So as an older generation, we have a role to play, and we need to hand over the torch to the new generation. And this is an add-on comment and another question from me. But before that, if you do have question, please raise your hands. And this is a common question and agenda. So to be terminologically, technically difficult, in Korean society, before the democracy, before the democratization and post-democratization's democracy are different. So actually, military dictatorship is occupying the south, and the authoritarian regime occupied the north. So actually, we need to turn these adversary coexistence into a peaceful coexistence, but we are not able to do that. Through this process, there have been southern conflicts created. So some people say that when they talk about the peace, they talk about they also talk about the fact that this is not an concept. And so sustainability and human rights are universal values. But how can you do this? So how can you realize these universal values, and what would be the meaning of the universal values? And this is where a lot of opinions divided and fragmented. And also, Korean society is all the more fragmented in these days. So game changer or paradigm shift are important. So in the climate change era, in climate crisis, we are all the same victims, whether it be non-democratized worlds or democratized worlds. So this is the agenda. So in the front of the climate crisis era, how can we overcome these ideological differences, going beyond the human rights, left wing or right wing? How can we build a common community for climate response? So what would be the good point to start? When we talk about the climate crisis, yesterday's paper taught me that in Google, extraordinary attorney 우영우, rather than this, climate crisis is the most search engine term. So climate crisis is the most severe situation to the younger generations and to the older generation. And this is not only confined to Korea, but it is a global phenomenon. So we need to overcome these differences, and we need to reach a consensus. This might be the consumption, social issues. Is there any possibility for this? So this is a question that I would like to throw you. Of course, we touched upon this, but where would be the good point to start? So you said game changer, right? What would be the good point to start?
Well, that is very tough question to answer. I talked about Cold War era and the fear of nuclear threat or nuclear weapon contributed to the end of Cold War era. When we think about the 1980s, all around the world there were many cities, and in those cities millions of people gathered together, and thanks to their voices, major countries, including Soviet Union and the United States, the head of the states changed their mind. So eventually, when it comes to the nuclear war or climate crisis, there are so many things in common, but there is one stark difference. We can deter the nuclear war, but as for climate crisis, if we pass the tipping point, there is no return. So that is the biggest difference between the two. But there is one thing in common. Now we are trying to change the term of Holocene into human scene. So this crisis is man-made crisis. If that is so, then we can find hope from human being. Climate crisis can result in the depression and frustration, but before we reach that point, we need to foster our hope. That is the only way we can make this climate crisis as a game changer.
So nuclear weapons and nuclear war. So who would like to go for this? No one wants for this. According to the largest survey organization, it tells that 67% of respondents say that nuclear weapons are not able to establish peace building, and 5% say no. And this is our reality. And also from the democratization, we have gone through many bumpy roads, and this is the strong experience and aspiration and willingness that Koreans have. So when we talk about the nuclear weapon race, what would be the foundation for this, and who would like to raise this voice on this issue? So on the Korean Peninsula, on the living creature never survive if this situation left unchecked, and this is situation at the doorstep. So this should be felt with everyone and with a lot of public awareness increased. Last year we have social debate between the left wing and the right wing. So across the nation, they have talked about the Korean Peninsula peace, and over a year, they increased their understanding and recognize the importance of peace. This is experience. So for 4 years, we have done that annually. But rather before that, we are very busy to blame with each other before that event. So actually, no one wants for nuclear war, and also we need to realize the green detente, and this is a non-military approach. So response to the climate crisis and ecosystem degradation, from energy transition to maritime ecosystem and to climate crisis, we should find out solutions to this, and we need to be gradual in going together to map out that solution. Only then we are able to build trust with the North, and we are able to build trust with non-conflict sources, so we can open up the era of freedom and peace. So we need to be gradual. This is important thing that I'd like to mention.
Thank you very much. There was a question about the role of young people. If we make something as a myth, then individual action seems powerless usually. So when it comes to the future we want to live, we can make some bullet points. So we need to have a picture about our future we want to live, and we need to think who will make that decision and who will hinder that decision making. We need to make this clear. This is not something falling from the heaven, and it is not something given to us. Rather, we need to make our decision by ourselves. This is very rare opportunity. So this decision-making power is given, then we need to make the right decision. If we don't make effort to make the right decision, then our future will be bleak. And after the Cold War II, now we have the Ukraine war, but accept that for a long time, for 70 years on the Korean Peninsula, the peace has continued. So we easily think that peace is taken for granted. However, just like the delicate flower, as mentioned by one Nobel Peace Laureate, we need to take care of the flower every day. We take the shower every morning, and we clean our teeth, and we wear clothes and look at the mirror every morning. Just like that, we need to take care of the peace every day. Thank you very much. It is time to wrap up. Now, Nobel Peace Laureates share their wisdom and experience. And while listening to their stories, I realized that there is one thing in common. The key word is dialogue. And that dialogue is not between the people who have the same mind. Rather, putting our foot in others' shoes is dialogue. Sometimes we never understand each other, but through dialogue, we can reconsider our stereotype. If I'm in the position of the others, what would be our thinking? That is practice. So we need many training and exercise. Just like watering the flower, we need to make continued effort. Gorbachev created this World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. At the time, countries conflicted with each other, but dialogue was the solution. And Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games was also a dialogue. We wanted to have a face-to-face dialogue. Previously, I thought how we can connect the Nobel Peace Prize with the Pyeongchang Olympic spirit. We invested 12 years to attract the Winter Olympic Games, and 12 years is a long time. During that time, there might be some regime changes, but regardless, we need to have the consistency. If we make 12 years of effort, then by 2030, we can have visible outcome. We should not be impatient. We need to make continued effort in a consistent manner. With this, let me conclude my session. And please give a big round of applause to all the panelists. Thank you very much.